Hello, my name is Ben Hovland, and I'm a commissioner with the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, or EAC. As the federal clearinghouse on election administration, the EAC is working to provide information and resources for election officials and offering whatever support we can at the federal level to help state and local officials administer safe, secure, accessible, and accurate elections. Today's video chat is the third in a series focused on administering elections in college towns and identifying ways to better serve student populations. Today's conversation centers on the role of institutions of higher education. Many people may not know that the Higher Education Act contains language requiring eligible post-secondary institutions to make a good faith effort to distribute a voter registration form to each student enrolled in a degree or certificate program and physically in attendance at the institution. Beyond that requirement is the opportunity to help encourage students to become civically engaged and active participants in their community. We know that voting is habit forming and critical to engage young voters and ensure they have a positive experience. Doing so could instill an interest in voting that lasts a lifetime. Fortunately, today we are joined by an amazing group to discuss this topic. Joining me are Leah Murray, the Brady Presidential Distinguished Professor in the Department of Political Science and Philosophy at Weber State University in Utah. Murray currently serves as the director of the Walker Institute of Politics and Public Service. Professor Murray's primary research interests are in American politics, specifically youth political engagement, and her recent publications include pieces that focus on campus climates for political learning. Welcome. We also have Tiffany Seawright, who is the Director of Leadership and Engagement in the Office of Leadership and Civic Engagement at North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University. Welcome. Sam Novey is the Chief Strategist at the University of Maryland Center for Democracy and Civic Engagement. He is a co-founder of the Student Learn, Students Vote Coalition, Maryland Civic Education Coalition, and Baltimore Votes Coalition, among other civic initiatives. He also serves as the Secretary of the Baltimore City Board of Elections and is a member of the Baltimore City Fair Election Fund Commission. We also have Sandra Rodríguez, who is the Director of the Associated Students of the University of Nevada Center for Student Engagement at the University of Nevada, Reno. She has 30 years of experience engaging students in civic learning and democratic engagement in higher education. Her focus is the strong ties between student engagement, civic literacy, civic agency, and equity in inclusion in creating just democratic learning communities. She earned her Ph.D. in education at the University of Nevada, Reno. Welcome. Also from the University of Nevada, Reno, Amy Koeckes, who is the Associate Director for the Center for Student Engagement at the University of Nevada, Reno. She advises and supervises various areas, including the student media, marketing, student employment development, clubs, democratic civic engagement, volunteerism, community partner development, and various services to students. She earned her MA in Educational Leadership and her BA in Art at the University of Nevada, Reno. And finally, last but not least, Josh Young is the director of Miami-Dade College's Institute for Civic Engagement and Democracy, where he oversees a host of civic learning and democratic engagement programming. Josh has a bachelor's degree from the University of Virginia and master's degrees in social work and public administration from Florida State University. So welcome and thank you all for joining me today. And really to just kick things off, I would love to jump into some questions, but to really start, I would love to give each of you an opportunity to share a little bit more about your campus, the student population, and your office or program within that. And we'll go in the order of introduction. So Professor Murray, if you could kick us off.
Sure. So I am a professor at Weber State University. Weber State University is a regional comprehensive university that services the counties. Like 80% of our students come from the counties in which we live. The counties we are in are Weber County, Davis County, and Morgan County, which is about 45 minutes north of Salt Lake City, Utah, if you know anything about geography. So that's where we are. And our student population, we are like I said, because we're so embedded in the community, does that make sense? Like our students are part of this community. To a certain extent, the voter engagement work and our work with elections officials and the programs we've been running here very much services the community as well as our students, right? So it's not just a learning outcome, it actually is building these students as future volunteers, future poll workers in the place where they live.
Thank you for that. Tiffany, Seawright.
Hello, everyone. So yes, I work at North Carolina A&T State University. So that is A&T Agricultural and Technical State University. It is a public, historically Black land grant research university in Greensboro, North Carolina, in the East Greensboro area of North Carolina. And my office, we serve the whole campus for leadership development. So we are really big on developing civic leaders, but leadership is, you can kind of transition all of that stuff into any kind of profession. But we are really heavy on building those civic leaders, folks that are involved in the community, those that we have a cross the street campaign. We cross the street all four directions of our campus to go into East Greensboro and make a difference, make a change, and educate about voting, educate about issues that are going on, issues that are affecting these communities, and making sure that the folks in these areas who are disadvantaged and at risk really have an idea of what decisions are being made on their behalf, and that A&T students are showing up to help with educating as well as being a part of voting for this community, which they call home.
Thank you. Sam.
Hey everyone, I'm Sam Novey. I'm here at the University of Maryland. We are a public land grant flagship university for the state of Maryland. In our center, we're really focused on mobilizing the full potential of the talent and the knowledge and the convening power at our university to build a more inclusive democracy. So we have about 30,000 undergrad students, about 3/4 from the state of Maryland, about 1/4 from out of state. So we're focused on mobilizing as many of those folks as we can to vote, to serve as poll workers, to vote in local elections in College Park with our great College Park Election Commission, and generally engage our students fully. We also are very active in something called the Student Vote Research Network, where we mobilize scholars from across our university, as well as other folks in political science across the country, to participate in collecting and synthesizing knowledge, so that folks mobilizing student voters can do that in a research informed way. And then we also really focus on using our convening power, particularly we're inside the Beltway in DC, and so we are the host of the National Student Vote Summit this November, and we hope that we'll be seeing many of you there, and we're so proud to be using our convening power in that way.
That's great, thank you. Team University of Nevada, Reno, I'll let you both chime in here. Maybe Sandra, if you want to start, and Amy, anything else that you want to add?
Well, first things first, the University of Nevada, Reno is a flagship public land grant institution in the state of Nevada. And I would say that if you want to be good at your job related to civic literacy and democratic engagement, have a colleague you've been working with for 20 years to support that notion. So I guess what I want to share is a framework we work within. We have spent, starting around 2012, and it was, we started focusing on connecting civic literacy and democratic engagement to diversity, equity, and inclusion as a means to a social justice end. We do not believe that social justice is partisan. So our work is very nonpartisan. Our focus is in creating and developing critical democratic citizens. In our work, we want to ensure our students, to give you an idea, when I got to the University of Nevada, Reno in 1998, less than 4% of our students were students of color or from marginalized communities. Our entering first year class this year of 3,600 students is 49% members of marginalized communities. So we are quickly becoming a minority serving institution, a Hispanic serving institution. With that in mind, We kept our focus on our students. And so our goal is to ensure that we impart civic generational wealth. We know a higher education degree will impact the family. We believe that our work around CLD and DI will impact the civic generational wealth that can get passed on from the students to their families and generations and beyond. I'm going to turn it over to Amy so she can talk as our specialist in community engagement about the work we do related to that.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just add a little bit about the University of Nevada, Reno, of being, we're about 3 hours or so from San Francisco. Our other large institution in the state of Nevada is UNLV, which most people are surprised is an 8 to 10 hour drive. So oftentimes our university is pulling not only members of our state, which includes then very urban and rural in Nevada, as well as surrounding states. We get a lot of students from California, as well as the Western states, and then of course international. And so we're a mixture of undergrad and graduate students within our populations. And so with that, in educating and working around voting brings all that complexities that I'm sure we'll get into as we start to talk more about the work and how we have to meet those populations. And again, coming from a lot of people from the surrounding area of states and how we need to inform them, right, about how they can get registered and get their voice out there. So I'll just add that piece, I think, for now, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you for that. And Josh Young, Miami-Dade College, tell us a little bit about it.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, I'm really proud to be doing this work at a community college. We're a huge community college with about 100,000 students. We're 94% minority, mainly Hispanic, but also a large African-American population. Almost 70% of our students are low income. Almost 60% are first generation. So kind of a typical community college population. And the reality is most community college students face a huge civic empowerment gap. So our students compared to middle and upper class white counterparts have fewer and lower quality opportunities for civic engagement. So this work is so important in community colleges. And I think about 40% of undergraduates across the country are in community colleges. Unfortunately, not enough community colleges have infrastructure and staff to support this work. So thank you for including us today. And my office is the Institute for Civic Engagement and Democracy, and we're a college-wide department, and we're all about decreasing that civic empowerment gap.
That's great, thank you. And actually, so to jump into another question, we'll go in reverse order. So Josh, you're up first on this one. Can you talk a little bit about how you've worked with either your local election officials and or student groups to help engage students or help them access polling places or other methods of voting? And can you just talk a little bit about some of the benefits of this work for anyone who's thinking about getting more involved?
Yeah, we love our elections department here in Miami-Dade County, Florida. And we have a very close relationship with them. Most Department of Elections have outreach teams. So we are on first name basis with all those folks. We participate in all the civic holidays. We can talk more about that later, but National Voter Registration Day, National Voter Education Week, Vote Early Day. And we always reach out to them. They come on campus and set up tables. They do education. We also do a lot of poll worker recruitment with them. We work with them to get 2 early voting sites on our 2 largest campuses. We also work with them to host poll worker training on one of our campuses. They've just been a great partner over the years and really important.
That's great. We'll continue our reverse order this time. And so University of Nevada, Reno, you're up. I don't know how you all want to split it up, but
Go, Amy.
Yeah. So, I mean, I will just echo what Josh said. We just have such a great relationship with our local election official office. And we're actually kind of lucky. It's maybe only about I don't know, 3-4 blocks away. So it's not too far from our campus, which is also really nice. And oftentimes we're on first name basis with them. They really review and help any information we put out there. So we have a voting website that's dedicated to our students and with that information in mind. And they're always reviewing it and adding and telling me, hey, these updates and this and that. And so there's been a good partner, right? So that we're sharing the correct information with our students, with the deadlines of when to paper register to vote in our state. And so there's been that really working together. They train how to do voter registration on our campus. And so they're doing the training we work very closely with our undergraduate student government, which is referred to as the Associated Students here. And they have an arm that goes out and registers people to vote. So they provide the training, right? So that we're giving all the correct information out and getting those forms. And then we're turning in those forms. And one of the great partnerships that I'd like to just highlight with them is how much that we have worked with them is that they used to charge 10 cents per paper form. And because we've become such a good partner with them and they see the work that we're doing is so helpful for them, they have waived that charge. And so that has been something that has been really, I think, beneficial, right? As we're doing this work on our campus and we're returning those forms and we're making, I like to say that hopefully we're not turning them in incorrectly, like they're all correct. And so those are the things and the partnerships that we've really made with them and will continue on those pieces. And Sandy, maybe you want to talk about the on-campus voting.
Yeah, we also can't do this work without our campus partners. We actually have voting on our campus in the Joe Crowley Student Union. So we literally had thousands turn out to vote on our campus. But I think what's also important is the work that we're doing with student groups. So much so that we are the one organization that's allowed to go into the Washoe County School District and to register 17-year-olds to vote. Amy, how many 17-year-olds have we registered to vote? Granted, pandemic kind of set in, but what would the number be off the top of your head?
Yeah, we're about close to 8,000 in our total.
And so it has been amazing. The more you ask, especially where democracy is concerned, believe it or not, people will respond. They'll say, yeah, we want to be a part of that. And so I would like to think the integrity we're bringing to the democratic process by having these partnerships with local officials, with local elected officials, and with the students on our campus.
That's great. Thank you for that. Sam.
Great. So one recent example that comes to mind that I think is exciting is a good example of how some of the academic or research enterprise can also be relevant here is, we were hearing in our center, both in Maryland and from election administrators around the country, that there was a lot of concern about, weather-related disasters, particularly with the overlap between the Atlantic hurricane season and election season in many states. And we on the Maryland campus in our School of Engineering, we have a Center for Disaster Resilience, which is studying all the different ways that government agencies and different parts of society are working to be more resilient to disasters, particularly as climate change is increasing their intensity and frequency. And so we've been working with the scholars in that center to bring that expertise to bear on the problems facing local election officials and developing risk profiles for election offices and developing an interview protocol that we can use to study what happens when disasters strike during elections and other sort of interventions that can be helpful, collecting resilience or continuing operation plans from election offices. So we're also, obviously there's lots of exciting work around our students as well, but I did want to share that example where there's, in addition to being able to engage our students, we've got faculty who know about all sorts of stuff that can be relevant to elections. And one thing we try to do at University of Maryland is try to make sure that when our faculty knows something that's relevant, we make that accessible to the election officials who can use it.
That's great. Tiffany, I wanted to come to you. And one of the things that would love to hear sort of about your experience at North Carolina A&T. And in our conversation the other day, one thing you mentioned that really resonated, and I think is appropriate here, you talked about that aha moment for students where they sort of realize these benefits, and some of what Sandra was saying earlier, sort of made me think back to that. And so again, would love to hear about the work you've done to engage students and sort of some of those benefits that you've seen.
So thank you. We have actually created our civic engagement coalition. And so on the coalition, we focus on different pillars and have different work groups set up. And we also use our students for those work groups as work group leads. And so this coalition is made up of students, faculty, staff, and community partners. So our nonpartisan partners that we have that we really work with our 365 partners, but students actually help to lead the work groups. And so I always pair a student lead with a faculty or staff member to kind of push the work. The work groups focus on different things. So we have institutional change and cultural change. That's as one work group. And these are just examples. We have voter registration work group, voter education work group, voter excitement and get out the vote. And then we have civic learning and engagement work group. We also have our first year focus work group. And so all of these different work groups focus their attention and build out long-term and short-term goals to make sure that we are moving in the right direction. We also have our Civic Fellows group, and our Civic Fellows group is a group of students that are paid by outside nonpartisan organizations that are our 365 partners, but they pay them to do the civic engagement work here on campus, the voter engagement work on campus. And we meet I bring all of the Civic Fellows together. I have about 20 fellows, and I bring them all together along with our civic engagement organizations. So we have different organizations that have a pillar within their principles that has a focus on civic engagement. And so we bring them to the table as well. We meet every 2 weeks to kind of figure out how can we collaborate, how can we create excitement and awareness around different issues, not just voter registration and education, but how do we tie the whole process of democracy back to issues that are affecting them, their everyday lives, and making it all relevant, right? But we bring the students to the table to kind of tell us how do we create those aha moments for our campus. A lot of our students are coming from spaces where civic, they didn't have a civics class, right? So civics is being taken out of curriculum across the nation. And so knowing that, our students are coming very unaware of what democracy is, one, and how it affects their life. What we hear most of the times is that I don't know who's on the ballot. I don't know what these positions do. I don't know anything about this, so I'm not going to vote. And so we are really battling and really trying to attack the whole concept of not being aware, the whole concept of being uneducated about positions and how these positions make decisions for different issues, and then tie it all the way back to when you graduate or right now, how this issue shows up in your life right now. And so that has been our main focus. And we too, like the other schools, we work very closely. I don't know what I would do without being able to have Charlie's number, our director of our Guilford County Board of Elections, have him on speed dial. When anything new happens, anything comes up, we're calling each other, especially during the season, like we're calling each other. He's always sending us updates on things that we need to know. And then we also give them our addresses. So on our campus, there are 2 different ways to do addresses. And we make sure that every year they have a fresh list. It doesn't change, but just in case you lost it, let's go ahead. And if I don't send it, he's calling me. Seawright, you didn't send us your list, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. But we here, this work is truly student driven. And so we make sure that they have access to our folks over at the Board of Elections. They come in, they do trainings, workshops, all kinds of stuff, and they can just pick up the phone and call them. They're constantly having communication with them and engaging on different topics. So I truly would push anybody that's trying to do this work to build that, but also utilize your students to build those relationships, because once they see that your students care, they care more about protecting your campus and making sure that there's a voice at the table when it's time to get those polling sites on campus. And so that's been key for A&T.
That's great. So many good points in there. Appreciate that. Leah, if you want to chime in on this one again, just sort of just to again how you've worked with your local election office. For those in the elections community, Weber County, Ricky Hatch, and or your student groups, and just about how you've seen some of the benefits of this work.
Sure. So I think I loved how Tiffany landed there, that if they see the students as valuable parts of the community, they're more likely to work with you to make sure that students are engaged, right? So we in the state of Utah went pretty much vote by mail back in 2014. In advance of that move by the state, Weber State University hosted workshops around what vote by mail looks like. Why would county clerks be wanting and preferring vote by mail? We were kind of a convener. I like how Sam used that language. We were a convener in that space of how candidates were going to feel about what was happening with the vote by mail, how voters would feel about it. So what was fabulous was, as a result of doing the work of being connected to our county clerks so that our students would be able to be poll workers and would be a part of all of that, even when we switched to vote by mail and the same needs for labor don't exist, they still need students to like run the pull up, how do I say, the on-site voting, because we do still have some of those. We partnered very specifically with our student athletes. And so I have like 250 student athletes who are required by the NCAA to do something about civic engagement. And they show up wearing all their purple, beautiful, right? Just gorgeous ambassadors for the university and the community. And they do, right, it's a win-win. Those students had to have a volunteer activity on election day. Our county clerks needed to have volunteers to help do like the work of getting, the ballots through the process. And we just kind of married those together, and that the value add, I think I won't add because there are similar things I could say to what other people have said, but the value add of just having the relationships, the county clerks being aware of how powerful our students can be, right, has been huge. And us being able to expand the capacity of our local elections offices as they adapt to all of their changes over the years.
That's great. A lot of these comments made me think about, one of the things that we sort of hear a lot about, or think a lot about is effective methods of communicating or voter education materials for students. And so I'll just throw this one out for anybody. Again, some of these answers may be similar, so I'll just give anybody a chance to throw in things they've seen that have made those type of communications or voter outreach be particularly effective. I'll open the floor if anyone wants to jump in first. And if not, I'll start calling on people.
I'd like to say something about the importance of faculty with the community college student population, because our students come to campus and then they leave and they're working and they're going to school part-time often. So for us, we've really focused on faculty. We have a faculty professional development workshop that helps faculty figure out how to integrate nonpartisan voter engagement into their classes, and that's been super successful. We also have our own standalone election readiness website, mdc.edu/vote, and that's been successful. We had 27,000 hits on that page 2 years ago because of faculty talking to students in their classes. And we also made some videos with our students talking about why voting is important, so they're hearing it from their peers. And the last thing I'll mention, we have a civic action scorecard. I don't know if you can see this, but it has about 93 different civic actions that students can complete and earn points and earn awards, and 29 of them are related to democratic engagement. And it's things like registering to vote, knowing who your elected officials are, serving as a poll worker, comparing different political ideologies. And that's been very successful as well to raise students' awareness about the importance of political participation.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
know,
I think this is, oh, sorry, Ben,
Go
this
ahead,
is
Amy.
Amy, and I'll just add that I think one of the things that we've seen successful is, again, the partnering with the local elections commission board is that we used our mascots. So we're the wolf pack, and so we have multiple mascots, and we got them holding the stickers that would be handed out here in Washoe County. We have them in our videos, putting, we are also have the mail in into the ballot. So they allowed us to borrow some of those things to be in our videos and our pictures. And we had our mascots holding a voting flag. And so those are the types of things that we have tried to institute and have on our campus to say, hey, you're a member of the wolf pack. This is really important. And, look, our mascots are supporting you kind of in a way. And so we've seen that connection of that work really well with our student population. We've also done like a shorter URL. So it's unr.edu/voting. And so we've tried to use those languages and those pieces to connect with students and make it easy to find out the information.
I would just add, those are great things, and we try to utilize some of those, but one of the most impactful things is everybody, this generation, everyone wants to be an influencer. So what we do is we tap into our campus influencers. And if we can touch them and get them passionate about voting, get them passionate about democracy, then they help out with spreading the word. They get very creative with their messaging, with how they spread the word, but tapping into those students, training students to train or to educate their peers has been very impactful on our campus. You see some of the social media posts and some of the things that these students are doing. They're walking around with their phones, and they're interviewing people, and they're putting people on the spot and asking them these questions like, do you know who this is? Do you know what this position does? Oh, you don't know? And they're challenging them to think outside the box about what this looks like. Because anytime you ask students around here, you politically engaged, I don't like politics, I don't do politics, but then we tie politics to everything they do. We are looking and trying to coordinate now, it's the 50th year of celebration of hip hop. And so we're going to do I-40 hip hop and politics summit to draw all of that together, because our students are listening to hip hop. So how do we make it relevant to them? How do we tie it to their interests? How do we show them that this is not just something in the clouds that's happening, but these are real people that are in position making real impacts on your lives based off of decisions that they're making. And if you don't show up to the poll, then they are making the decision on your behalf and you don't even know about it. The residual effect you'll see after you graduate, the residual effect of what your decision is right now. So we tie it all back to everyday life. And when we go back to talking about those aha moments, we're tying environmental justice into it. We're tying in criminal justice reform. We're tying in gun violence, and just tying it into things that they are seeing on social media, things that they are seeing every day, right in their face. We're tying it back to their homes and what they've experienced back home. And we're making it real for them, but we're utilizing our influencers, our campus influencers, to do that. So that has been probably the most impactful, but we got to make sure that this information is digestible. Sometimes when I'm hearing officials talk, they're talking over my head. So I know that my students are like, what are, they're talking a whole nother language, right? So how do we make the information digestible and make it make sense to them, where they can connect with the information? So definitely utilize your students to get the information out.
Great.
Just to quickly co-sign what Tiffany was saying about digestible information. We had an issue in Maryland where there's a law that is meant to actually prevent legislators from moving outside their district and then running for office back where they used to live, but it actually created, it makes residency kind of complicated in the state of Maryland for voter registration under state law. And so the State Board of Elections they just had sort of presented that in all its complex glory on their website, and was causing huge problems on our campus because they'd go to State Board of, elections.maryland.gov/students, and it was suddenly very unclear if you could vote at your campus address or not. And so we worked with our state board to present that in a simple and clear way that, made students aware of their rights very simply. And so I think there's obviously lots of amazing things that election officials can do to help make voting cool, and they should definitely do that. But I think the baseline of just presenting the rules in a really simple way that's really a core responsibility of the election official. And I think working with your campus partners to identify where things are not clear and clarify is really important.
And I would add the data matters. Every 2 years since 2016, we've been doing a campus-wide civic engagement survey. We get anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 students, so we get a statistically valid sample. And the data matters because it's student voice. Turning around and sharing that student voice is some of the most powerful educational materials that we've been able to share with our campus. Asking them whether or not they intend to vote, asking what their top 20 issues are. The student government affairs team, registered lobbyists, then goes to the state legislature and says, hey, here are student issues. So when students know that you're using the data that matters to them, they also run with the data. Right now, after 10 years of doing this, it's great when a student government officer walks in and says, hey, Sandy, what's the data around, you name it, right? Voter turnout, voter registration, volunteerism on our campus. So getting their voice attached to data, right? And then turning it over to them, that's powerful educational material.
That's awesome. All loads of great examples there. One thing that I also wanted to hit on is, one of the things that we hear a lot from election officials, particularly in the poll worker context, is, sort of the investment when you have such turnover rates, with, obviously the nature of college or higher education. We hope these students graduate and move on. But, a lot of times, like in the context of poll worker recruitment, they'll be like, well, I don't know if I want to spend the time for somebody who's going to be out of the community in 4 years potentially. And so, one of the things that I think would be great to hit on in this conversation is given the transitory nature of college campuses, what are some tips for effective, long-lasting campus initiatives and partnerships with election offices? I'll mix it up a little bit here on our order, but Sandy, you've hit on some of this type of stuff, so I'll let you kick us off here, and then maybe Leah.
Okay, I definitely will start with the civic engagement survey. It has now got historical context on this campus. The fact that we can get 4,000 students to fill out, and it, Amy, help me out here. How long does it take to fill out? 20 minutes, maybe?
Not even that, yeah.
We are getting invaluable data that has really helped us to increase voter registration, voter turnout. And of course, we rely on the NSOLV data, right? To let us know something like 83% of our students registered to vote and 72% of that group actually voted. So students pass that information on. And I go back to civic generational wealth. You can even talk about that from a class standing, so to speak. If first year students walk in and second and third and fourth year students are saying, hey, part of the social norm on our campus is that democracy needs to matter to you, right? It's important. That's how you pass on that responsibility. We always talk about rights. Do we connect the responsibility that comes with it? So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
I think, Ben, in answer to this question, I feel that what's important, and this is just from watching, doing research on campuses across the country, usually the biggest vulnerability in this work is when someone leaves a position, right? So it's built on, one person's passion project, and if they leave the position or the provost no longer cares about it, and then the whole thing can collapse. And I love like Sam's idea of continuity of operations, right? Like a little bit you could think about on a campus trying to make sure that the voter engagement is built into job descriptions in such a way that if a human who's not as interested in it anymore leaves, or you're right, the passion leaves the area, that the work still continues. Because I do think oftentimes with our community partners, not just in this work, but across campuses, it can be very transitory. Do you know what I mean? And then the partners left, you build capacity and now we don't have capacity anymore, right? So a little bit it's about building institutions on campus where everyone expects it to happen. So I love how Sandy talks about it's the social norm for students, but also it's the institutional norm that we're going to deliver on this promise to this community partner, especially in this election space.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Josh, you hit earlier on the impact of faculty at your institution and the way that, again, there may be more institutional sort of knowledge in that regard. Certainly that is something we've seen with poll worker recruitment, but anything you'd like to add there, or I can also open it up.
Yeah. Well, I just think if I were speaking to an election supervisor, whatever you do with our students, you're investing in their future and the future of our democracy. So if someone's a poll worker and then they leave South Florida or wherever, it's very likely they'll continue to be a poll worker somewhere else. Most of our students, all of them almost, live in Miami-Dade County, so we don't have as much of an issue with that. But I've seen so many of our students who never even voted, who signed up to be a poll worker, and it was such an empowering experience. And the Department of Elections in Miami-Dade County, I think nationally, is in desperate need for more young people. And every student I know who did it once goes back every year or every election cycle. So, it's an investment worth making for sure.
Absolutely. I don't know if there's anything else anyone wants to add on sort of that, building that institutional piece or memory, but.
I just wanted to shout out that there's a new transition management resource that just came out from the Students Learn, Students Vote Coalition, which I can drop in the chat here. But I think that this is definitely something a lot of folks are thinking about, and the publication of action plans, the maintenance of networks like the Students Learn, Students Vote Coalition. A lot of that is about helping the work continue on campuses, even as it might have a hiccup as Leah was saying. So I think there's a lot of improvement in those resources, and local election officials can work with those types of partners to continue working with the campus through a transition.
And Sam, one more thing tied into that, I mentioned earlier the civic holidays, and that's a great opportunity for every elections department to partner with local colleges and universities around those civic holidays. That's how we organize our voter engagement work now, and is very powerful, and with support of Students Learn, Students Vote Network and others. We love it. There's so much more available now for colleges and universities to do this work than there was 10, 15 years ago.
This work is actually built into, and for the past two, built into A&T's strategic plan. So anytime that I am writing my plan of action, it is all about tying it to the strategic plan and showing the correlation. And so when I'm out here talking to partners, I'm also talking to them about that. And so even the officials, they know that A&T is big on not only what we're doing right here in these four walls of the institution, but the greater thing that we are looking at is North Carolina as a whole. How are we retaining these students as the next generation of employees, and the next generation of officials, the next generation of whatever in North Carolina? So how are we pushing our students to give back to North Carolina and stay here in North Carolina and make a change, be an agent of change here in North Carolina? And we're tying that to everything. What's important is as these conversations about the strategic initiatives come up, that the correct people are sitting at the table and they have that in the forefront of their minds, that all of this is tied back to how do we build this political power here in our state, and make sure that we have a diverse group of folks at the table when we're talking about that power. And so A&T has done a very good job, and has made my job easy in the sense of being able to tie the greater vision and mission to this work that we're doing. And everybody is tied to the strategic plan. So if everybody can see themselves in the strategic plan and see this work in the strategic plan, then as people move on and people leave, then the plan doesn't change until we're in our next plan. And so that's going to continue to carry no matter who's in the seat.
That's a great point. Josh, something that, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's important as folks who are on college campuses that we be willing to bring to the table the hard conversations that need to be had around democracy, right? Poor people, people of color, queer people, women, young people experience democracy differently because we're usually coming at it from a place of struggle, right? As opposed to from a place of idealism. So I really think it's important that we be those examples, right? To bring up the hard questions. And I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. That is a great point. And, you know, I wanted to circle back to Josh. You'd mentioned something a second ago that I had wanted to tease out and talk about. You talked about, you know, how there are these resources now that maybe weren't there a few years ago with the Civic holidays and some of the other efforts. And so for all of you, I'd love to hear about just sort of, you know, for colleagues at institutions of higher education around the country who may be looking to engage more, do more in this area. You know, I'd love to hear any sort of tips or lessons learned that you'd have for folks who are looking to do more in this space. And, you know, Josh, since you brought up the point, I'll let you kick this one off.
I was just thinking, and some of you might be familiar with the Ideas 42 graduating students into voters, overcoming the psychological barriers faced by student voters. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with that report, but that's been super helpful to us because it breaks down the barriers to voting into 3 categories that I think a lot of our students face. And one of them is we have to think of our students as new voters. Like, they're uncertain about the details, the implications of voting, they're insecure about their level of political knowledge. They overestimate the difficulty of registering and voting. So when you develop your plan, you can take those things into account. The same thing around identity and self-expression. Most of our students don't view themselves as voters. So what can we do to change that? They're unsure how to register, or voting's not visible on campus, so they don't think it's common. And the last thing was just a psychological distance. They don't think concretely enough about voting. They don't have a plan. They don't realize how politics impacts, voting or not voting impacts their life no matter what. So again, develop your plan around some of those barriers that we know exist. And that's been really helpful to us. And also talk to your Department of Elections about those barriers, and they'll have ideas on how to address them as well.
That's great. Leah, I don't know if you have anything that you'd add to that, just again thinking about people who are considering engaging in this area, or tips or lessons learned that you have.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything, I can just echo what everyone has been saying, but for me, it's just been being respectful of the community partner that you're working with, these elections officials. I think also being respectful of the pulse of their work, which is not always the same as the pulse of an academic calendar, right? So our primaries rolled out like in August, right? So they needed help and I didn't have students. And the first time that happened, that wasn't super great, right? But you kind of learn, okay, I'm going to have to figure that out going forward. I think I would just kind of echo what everyone else said, but just add being aware of, you know, their calendar doesn't abide or adjust to yours. You have to kind of adjust the work you're doing to theirs.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? I know we've hit on some of the big ones here, but again, any tips or encouragement for folks who are looking to do this do this work would welcome that. You know, and actually I'll broaden it out. I'll hit 2 for 1 here too. You know, also thinking about for election officials, you know, elections look a little different all across the country. Institutions of higher education are different all across the country. And so if I'm an election official and I'm trying to figure out who to talk to on campus, sort of any tips maybe around where to start on that outreach. So either of those I'll open to the floor. Amy, I think I saw you on mute, so
Yeah, but you threw the second question in there, so now I was thinking, but I'll start. The other thing I was thinking about lessons learned is one of the stuff of the work that, and there's so many national organizations that are so supportive, and I know we've mentioned one here, but you know, NASPA for Student Affairs is very active in this space, as well as Civic Nation, and there's so many, and it has increased so much over the years, and there's just such good support, and so I think that's important, right? Because the complexities per state, per everything, per county, you know, whatever, it's very complicated, right? If you're getting into this work to start to look at all those layers. But I think one of the things that I've learned in the last couple of years, or lessons learned, is, you know, there's focus that you need to do this work all year round. That's number one. Number two, plans really matter. You put it down in writing, and you're kind of held accountable a little bit to that piece, right? And then you know, with that data, that piece is there too. But you know, there's the registering part, which is just as important as the education part, which is the get out to vote, and then the post-election work. So it doesn't really stop, I feel like, and so campuses have to embrace, I think, all of those things. The post-election piece a couple of years ago is something we really had to embrace and be ready for around our campus. We were doing so much work on the other pieces, and then it was like, oh yeah, we don't know who the president was a couple of years ago, right? And so how do we prepare our campus for that? And so there's things like that, I think, that are important in this work to consider in the year-long cycle.
Ben, just quickly, a piece of advice I have for election official: if they're not sure how to work with a university, reach out to the president and ask, who is your point person, or do you have a point person, or would you be willing to name a point person to build this partnership with us? Because we're interested in increasing voter education, voter registration with your institution. And usually president would respond, and if they designate someone, then that person will follow up, and things can start happening.
It's a great suggestion. Anybody else?
I would say, depending on the focal point and what the mission is of that person, student affairs definitely can connect with the students and the folks that are working directly with the students, because there are two sides of this, right? So there is that student focus and that get out the vote student focus. And so you have to connect with the right folks on that student affairs side. But then there are the folks that are helping to move some things systemically and on a larger playing field when it comes to creating plans and a lot of other stuff. And so I think you have to also look at that chancellor president side, or at least within that space. There's always someone within that space that can help to guide the work. And for folks that are coming into this work, I think that with this and the ever-changing dynamics of things that are going on and things that are coming up as different issues in different states, different counties, cities, you know, all of that, I think you have to, and with all the support that Amy talked about, we get a lot of support. It's when in a certain season, I'm going to get at least 30 emails in a week from outside folks that want to help, right? I think you have to be open to everything, but very cautious and careful about it all, because you can bringing in certain partners and certain groups can damage the work that you're trying to do. It can also create other issues within. So I think you have to like I said, be open to everything, because when I came into this work, when I first started in this position, this was not my wheelhouse. This was not something that was, that I say that, I'm great at or whatever. And so I had to learn the work. And so I think learning is always going to happen. That's why I say be open to everything, but be very careful. Careful, I already said, with the different organizations, because some organizations are coming in and you're a checkbox for them, right? And especially for where I am at this HBCU, that checkbox sometimes come with a hefty price. And so we want to make sure that I am careful in the sense that I am protecting my students, I am protecting my university, and that whoever is coming into this space is coming into the space for the right reason, and not short term, but trying to be a part of the work long term, because that in and out, we don't need a double Dutch. We need someone that is here, boots on the ground, helping to do this work, and not in and out when they want to. And so being very careful about that, and careful about accepting everybody, all money, not good money. I'm just going to say it like that, right? So funding will pour in, but all funding is not good funding for the work and what you're trying to do. Don't get burned out by this work. It's always going to be something, like we said, 365, right? But what type of support system network can you build to take some of the pressure off of the work? But don't get burned out. Be open, but be very careful as well. And creative. That's the other piece. Be creative, because this is a generation of students that truly has not been classified. We say this is a COVID generation. They have not truly been classified, identified for all the dynamics that they that make up who they are. And so we have to think outside the box with how we reach them, and how we build them into the leaders and citizens that we're trying to do.
I would add, first rule, you can't do this alone. Right, Amy? We had to figure that out the hard way 20 years. You can't do it alone. So stop trying. And two, once you are into the work, we need to learn to tell our story better. Because once we tell our story better, that's when folks start coming in. How can I be a part of the solution? And not just from within the campus, but external, right? So yeah, I would say those two things.
Well, that seems like a great note to end on. Absolutely, we need to do a better job of telling our story. I appreciate you all joining for this conversation and sharing a little bit about your stories. It was fun to learn about some of the work and your efforts and your recommendations, and just appreciate that. And thank you all again for your work, helping your students, helping Americans to get engaged and vote.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Having us, Ben.